The wedding music suddenly stopped. Every guest turned toward the entrance. A beautiful young African bride stood there, wearing a simple white wedding dress. Her eyes were filled with hope. But then, someone looked down. Where are her shoes? The hall fell silent. The bride was barefoot. A second later, laughter erupted across the entire wedding. The groom's wealthy relatives covered their mouths as they laughed. Guests pulled out their phones. This has to be a joke. She's too poor to even buy shoes. The groom's mother stood up in anger. She pointed at the bride and shouted, "I will never allow a barefoot beggar to marry my son." The bride lowered her head. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. She wanted to explain that she had sold her only pair of shoes the night before to buy life-saving medicine for the grandmother who had raised her. But no one wanted to hear the truth. The humiliation grew louder. Then, a deep engine roar echoed outside. 1, 2, 3. 6 black luxury SUVs stopped in front of the church. Everyone turned toward the doors. Bodyguards stepped out first. Then an elderly African man in an elegant black suit slowly emerged from the lead vehicle. The moment he appeared, judges stood up. Business leaders bowed their heads. Even the groom's father looked stunned. Without saying a single word, the powerful old man walked straight through the crowd. Past the laughing guests. Past the shocked groom. Past the furious mother. He stopped in front of the barefoot bride. He looked into her tear-filled eyes. Then smiled. With trembling hands, he gently took her hand and said words that left the entire church speechless. "My daughter, I've been searching for you for 15 years. The morning of Amina's wedding should have been the happiest day of her life. Instead, it began with tears." Long before sunrise, Amina quietly sat beside the old wooden bed where her grandmother lay struggling to breathe. The tiny mud house was silent except for the sound of her grandmother's weak coughs. Amina gently held her hand. "Grandmother, please don't worry. I'll find a way." The old woman smiled faintly. "My child, today is your wedding. You should only be thinking about your future." Amina forced a smile. "My future exists because of you. When my parents died, you became my mother. I'll never leave you when you need me most." The village doctor entered the small house carrying a worn leather bag. After checking the old woman, he looked at Amina with concern. "She needs this medicine immediately. If she doesn't receive it today, I'm afraid she may not survive the week." Amina looked at the small paper in her hand. The price was more money than she had saved in months. She quietly opened the wooden box that held her wedding belongings. Inside, there was only one valuable thing: a beautiful pair of white wedding shoes. She had dreamed about wearing them since the day David proposed. Slowly, she picked them up. Her hands trembled. Then she smiled through her tears. Shoes can be replaced. A grandmother cannot. Hours later, Amina walked into the village market. She sold her beautiful white shoes to a shopkeeper. The money was just enough to buy the medicine. She clutched the small medicine bag tightly against her chest as she hurried home. When the doctor gave the first dose to her grandmother, the old woman finally smiled. "You gave up your wedding shoes for me." Amina kissed her forehead. "I can walk barefoot, but I cannot live without you." Her grandmother burst into tears. Across town, the groom, David, stood nervously inside the church. Unlike his wealthy family, David had never cared about money. He fell in love with Amina because of her kindness. She had never asked him for expensive gifts. She had never cared about his family's wealth. She simply loved him. His best friend smiled. "You're lucky. David nodded proudly. I know. I'd marry her even if she arrived wearing old clothes. He had no idea. His family was planning something cruel. Inside a luxurious room behind the church, David's mother, Mrs. Johnson, adjusted her expensive diamond necklace. She looked at the wealthy guests surrounding her. My son deserves a woman from a rich family, not a poor village girl. One of her friends laughed. I heard the bride's entire house is smaller than your garage. Another replied. Maybe she'll ask for food instead of wedding gifts. The women laughed loudly. Mrs. Johnson smiled with pride. If she embarrasses this family today, I'll stop this wedding myself. Outside, the church bells began to ring. Guests filled every seat. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Photographers prepared their cameras. Everyone turned toward the large wooden doors. The music started. The doors slowly opened. Amina stepped inside. She looked breathtaking in her simple white dress. For one beautiful moment, the entire church became silent. Then, someone looked down. Wait. She's barefoot. Another guest laughed. She couldn't even afford shoes. Within seconds, the entire church erupted with laughter. People whispered. Some openly pointed at her feet. Several guests pulled out their phones. They recorded videos while laughing. One woman whispered loudly. This is the poorest bride I've ever seen. Another laughed. David must have lost his mind. Amina felt every eye on her. She wanted to disappear. But she kept walking. One slow step after another. Her head remained high. Even though her heart was breaking. David immediately noticed her bare feet. His face filled with confusion. He quietly walked toward her. Amina. What happened? She looked into his eyes. Then gently handed him the empty shoebox. I sold them. David frowned. Why? She smiled sadly. Grandmother needed medicine. I couldn't let her die. David's eyes filled with tears. Without another word, he knelt in front of everyone. He gently held her hands. You don't need shoes to be the most beautiful bride in the world. The church became silent. Some guests lowered their phones. Others looked away in shame. But not everyone. Mrs. Johnson suddenly stood up. Her voice echoed across the church. Enough. This wedding is over. Everyone froze. She walked toward Amina with anger burning in her eyes. Our family has a reputation. My son will not marry a barefoot beggar. David immediately stood between them. Mother. I love her. Mrs. Johnson pointed at Amina's feet. Love. She cannot even buy shoes. Tomorrow she'll beg us for money. David shook his head. You don't know her. I do. But his mother refused to listen. She turned toward the pastor. I forbid this marriage. The guests began whispering again. Some nodded in agreement. Others watched in silence. Amina slowly stepped backward. Tears rolled down her face. She whispered. I'm sorry. I never wanted to shame anyone. She turned to leave. David reached for her hand. Don't go. Before she could answer, a deep rumble echoed outside the church. Everyone turned toward the entrance. 1, 2, 3. Then 6 black luxury SUVs stopped outside. The church doors opened. Bodyguards dressed in black entered first. Behind them, an elderly African man wearing an elegant black suit slowly walked inside. The laughter disappeared instantly. Judges stood up. Business leaders lowered their heads. Even David's father looked shocked. The mysterious man ignored everyone. He walked calmly through the center aisle. past the wealthy guest, past the pastor, past David, until he stopped directly in front of Amina. He looked at her bare feet, then into her tear-filled eyes. A gentle smile appeared on his face. His voice trembled with emotion. "I've been looking for you. For 15 years. The entire church fell into complete silence. No one dared to speak. The mysterious elderly man stood before Amina, his eyes filled with tears. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, as if he had finally found someone he had searched for his entire life. Then, he gently held her trembling hands. "My child, I've been looking for you. For 15 long years." Amina looked confused. "I'm sorry. I don't think we've ever met." The old man smiled softly. "No. You met a man who had already lost everything. But you were too young to remember." The guest leaned forward. Even Mrs. Johnson stopped speaking. The old man slowly turned toward everyone. "My name is Samuel Kofi." The moment he spoke his name, gasps filled the church. Samuel Kofi, the founder of one of Africa's largest construction companies. A billionaire whose businesses had built schools, hospitals, highways, and cities across the continent. Reporters immediately began taking photographs. David's father whispered, "Samuel Kofi, the richest man in the country." Mrs. Johnson's face turned pale. Samuel looked back at Amina. 15 years ago, I wasn't a billionaire. I had just lost my wife. My company had collapsed. I had debts everywhere. I believed my life was over. One rainy evening, his old pickup truck slid off a mountain road. The vehicle rolled down a steep hill. Samuel was badly injured. His leg was trapped beneath the twisted metal. For hours, cars drove past. Nobody stopped. Everyone was afraid. Everyone except one little girl. A 10-year-old child carrying a basket of vegetables. Her clothes were old. Her shoes were torn. But her heart was richer than anyone Samuel had ever met. The church remained completely silent. Samuel smiled as he remembered. That little girl climbed down the dangerous hill. She wasn't afraid. She broke the truck window with a stone. Then she pulled me out. Amina slowly covered her mouth. Fragments of forgotten memories flashed through her mind. The rain. The broken truck. The injured stranger. She whispered, "I remember." Samuel nodded. "You gave me your only bottle of water. You tore a piece of your dress to stop my bleeding. You even gave me the bread your grandmother had packed for your dinner." Tears filled Amina's eyes. "I thought you were just a traveler." Samuel smiled. "You never asked who I was. You never asked for money. You simply said, if we stop helping strangers, the world will become a lonely place." The church became silent once again. Even the photographers lowered their cameras. Samuel continued. "After I recovered, my business slowly returned. I rebuilt everything. But I made myself one promise. I would find the little girl who saved my life. For 15 years, I searched villages, schools, hospitals. I even offered rewards. But I never found her. Until this morning. One of his assistants quietly handed him a photograph. It was today's wedding invitation. There, standing beside David, was the face he had never forgotten. Samuel looked at Amina. The little girl who saved my life was finally getting married. Mrs. Johnson could barely breathe. She looked at Amina's bare feet. Then at Samuel. Then at the luxury convoy outside. The realization hit her. She had humiliated the one woman being honored by Africa's most respected businessman. Samoa slowly turned toward the pastor. I believe this bride deserves someone to walk her down the aisle. He smiled warmly. If she will allow me, I would be honored to walk my daughter. The church exploded into applause. David smiled through his tears. He nodded proudly. Amina couldn't speak. She simply embraced Samoa tightly. For years, she had believed kindness disappeared after a good deed. Today, kindness had returned. Samoa gently offered his arm. Together, they began walking toward David. This time, no one laughed. The same guest who had mocked her moments earlier now stood with respect. Many wiped tears from their eyes. The little girl they had called poor was richer in character than every wealthy person in the room. The ceremony finally began. David held Amina's hands. I told you. You've always been the most beautiful woman in this world. Amina smiled. This is the happiest day of my life. They exchanged their vows, placed rings on each other's fingers, and became husband and wife. The church erupted with joyful applause. Just when everyone thought the surprises were over, Samoa smiled again. I have one wedding gift. Outside, the doors opened. A giant screen lit up. A breathtaking modern mansion appeared. Green gardens. A peaceful lake. Beautiful white walls. Samoa handed David a golden envelope. The keys are inside. The house belongs to both of you. The guest gasped. Mrs. Johnson nearly collapsed into her chair. Samoa wasn't finished. He handed Amina another folder. This is the registration document for the Amina Hope Foundation. We'll build schools for poor children, hospitals for families who cannot afford treatment, and scholarships for girls who dream of a better future. Amina burst into tears. She hugged Samuel again. I don't know how to thank you. Samuel smiled. You already thanked me 15 years ago. Slowly, Mrs. Johnson walked toward Amina. Her expensive jewelry no longer mattered. Her pride was gone. Tears rolled down her face. She fell to her knees. I'm ashamed. I judged you because you were poor. I never cared about your heart. Can you forgive me? The church watched silently. Amina gently lifted her to her feet. My grandmother always taught me, hate only creates more hate. I forgive you. Mrs. Johnson hugged her tightly. Both women cried together. Many guests began crying as well. Months later, the Amina Hope Foundation opened its first children's hospital. Then another school. Then another village clinic. Thousands of families found hope because one little girl had once chosen kindness over fear. Every year on their wedding anniversary, David and Amina returned to the mountain road where everything had begun. They placed fresh flowers beside the old tree where Samoa's truck had crashed. Samoa joined them every year. Not as a billionaire. Not as a businessman. But as a grateful father. As the sun set over the mountains, Samoa smiled at the happy couple. Wealth can buy houses. It can buy cars. It can buy power. But the greatest treasure in this world is a heart that chooses kindness when no one is watching. And that day, everyone finally understood. True value is never measured by money. It is measured by the kindness you leave behind.